All right. Hello and welcome to the first episode of The People Behind the Pitch. Today we have on a master of marketing, a gorilla of digital, the prince of private equity, quarter zip aficionado. This man has had a 20-year long career making ginormous strides in both B2C and B2B marketing organizations. He's done a handful of content on the internet. You can find all types of stuff from him, interviewing with all types of experts in the field, in tech and in marketing everywhere. His name is Manoj Jasra, and he joins us here today virtually. Manoj, pleasure to have you on the pod.
Thank you very much, Aaron. And is it well known that I have a quarter zip opportunity, or I've gone full button here this time versus a quarter zip?
You know what is? I don't know what it is, but I want to say every other video that I've seen from you, like the last 5 years, it's been quarter zip, and you've been rocking it well every time. But yeah, but the dark colors, yeah, I didn't even notice until you brought it up, but working perfectly fine just as well. Excellent to have you on. To start us off today, I want to talk to some, in the theme, in the spirit of people behind the pitch, getting to know the people some. What I thought was really interesting about you, going back to, I don't remember exactly when the year was, but talking about career entry points. So for me personally, I got into the tech world in a roundabout way in my mid-20s. I had no idea that I would be in there today. I just wanted to be a musician way back when. And then I only got into this space when I found out that there was a chance to make money in it and I wouldn't need to learn code to do it. And you did something entirely different than that. I think what you and me have in common, at least a piece of it, is that you're in charge of getting a message out there and representing a brand, but you got there leading in from a digital or like a technical regard. So that to be super interesting. I want to see if you could tell me some about how you got in, I think maybe web or software development, and just tell me about how you got to getting in the marketing world even to begin with.
Yeah, it's interesting how all of us take these kind of winding paths and end up where we are, right? No one has a straight A to B shot and saying, I want to be this and that, unless you have a very technical thing that you want to do. So my aspiration coming out of high school is to be a PE teacher. You know what? I'm scored in the high 90s in physical education. I'm like, that's what I got to do. Uh-huh. And my dad's like, how about you don't do that? And so and these were this was late 90s, early 2000s. So he's like, how about you get into computers, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's why I got into an engineering program in late 90s, early 2000s. And so I became a software developer doing front-end software development for a digital agency out of Kelowna, British Columbia, small city, but beautiful. But it was a digital marketing agency. And I think that's what stepped me into, actually, you know what? I'm actually better doing and more interested in doing things such as digital analytics, digital marketing. SEO at the time continues to be popular, but was more popular at that time. We were working heavily with the search engines directly. We're doing eye tracking research. So that pivot was important. And I guess even though I don't do software development today, I think one takeaway would be is everything that you do, I think, could be a stepping stone for something else, because that door of software development opened me up to digital agency. And I think it plays a pivotal role to where I am today. So it was just a fork in the road. If I don't make that decision, do I end up way somewhere else and continue to be somewhere in software development or whatever, data or whatever it is? But now I ended up in digital marketing because of that one very critical decision very early in my career.
Yeah. That's super interesting. Looking back on it now, have you ever wished that your dad would have just let you run with becoming a PE teacher?
I'm glad he didn't. Not to say I don't want to diss any PE teachers out there, because they've got benefits of interacting with students all the time, and they're happy they got the couple months vacation in the summer as well. But I'm glad he made me do it, because I think the challenges that have come up in my career have been awesome, I think, right? So in this space, I've been able to continue to move along in different roles in different companies. And I think I always look for challenges. I don't want to ever feel content. And I think when I do feel content, I feel that's where I'm procrastinating and need to make a move.
Yeah, for sure. I can dig it. I don't know that I'd ever been content in a job until after getting into tech or in the sales realm and making some moves like that. And I think a piece of that has to deal with the money. I mean, hey, this is a show that circles a lot around technology, but I mean, the entirety of human advancement kind of centers around technology. So it kind of makes sense that's where the money is. And I'm a recruiter too. I used to have to recruit people into the entry level, and that's a big piece. Like, you get into this industry, into this game, because it is the future, and it kind of always will be by definition. But in talking about some career transitions, so I think one of the another interesting thing that I wanted to talk to you about is, you've been in charge of marketing programs. You've taken B2C brands, some restaurants that I'm a fan of, airlines and hotels, some travel companies. And I think that's something that you get exposure to in the agency realm. A lot of times is you get like a real broad scope, but then I think after that have made a pivot into B2B. And, as a seller, I mean, I used to sell knives way back when. If anybody's familiar with vendor marketing, shouts out. And I think a lot of times in the sales realm, B2C is kind of looked at as we'll call it like a lesser than, maybe like a lower vibrational level of selling, or maybe marketing. I don't know if that's a thing for marketing, if you've heard rumblings, but can you talk to me about that transition from, because I think that's how it was for you. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you started off in doing digital for B2C and then going into B2B. How did that pan out?
Yeah, so I think like it is a pretty big transition, and not a lot of the same methodologies apply. And the cool thing about B2C is, I would say actually 3/4 of my career is in B2C, and then probably even the last say 5 or 6 is in B2B.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the cool thing about B2C is like it's instant gratification, right? You're talking about millions of dollars, hundreds and thousands of users. You can make small optimizations and get lots of benefit. There's lots of competition potentially. So in my B2C career, I was in airline, hospitality, and telco, right? And so a variety of different ways that you can drive strategy and get results in different ways, but it's instant gratification. You're seeing a lot of volume of results impact your business, and you're seeing a lot of your strategies take off right in front of you, and you don't have to wait in days or weeks. It's like almost instant when you're talking about volumes that those companies were doing at the time. The transition to B2B actually came through a relationship. So I worked with a project manager at the time, and he was the founder of now Xeris, who's sold to Acolyte, a New Mountain Capital company. But he introduced me. He was doing cloud development and cloud migration modernization out of like Calgary, Alberta. And he was a project manager at Shaw Communications who became a co-founder. And I stuck with him. I was an advisor for him at a time. And he introduced me to B2B in a real way and private equity. So he thought my skills would translate well, because I think I'm methodical in what I do. I use an analytical approach. I'm patient. B2B is about patience, and it's about building the right kind of engine to do things effectively. And so that introduction, getting into New Mountain Capital and Acolyte through Jeremy, was a big reason why my career pivoted into B2C, from B2C to B2B. And I think the biggest challenges are really like you have to know the product inside and out. I think that's very important. The relationships are even more important, because you have in B2B companies and technology companies, you have different people looking after different sectors. Each one of them has a drive and a factor that's important. In the B2B space I'm in with private equity, it's a heavy magnifying glass on results, because you're in it for investor growth, not just for the growth of the company you're working for. So there's a double magnifying glass on it. And I think you're thrown into the deep end and you have to swim because of all these things I kind of mentioned, I would say. And throughout it, I've learned a lot of different techniques, strategies, relationships that have been successful.
Yeah. No, and that's super interesting. I hadn't thought about that before. The nexus of like when you're in the PE world and you're in the private equity world, you are acting as a CMO not only for a portfolio company, but you have your own investor relations. You have kind of a double-sided brand that you have to represent, I think, or that you have to lead. And I guess that could be the case for public companies too, but normally maybe not so much as one for startups, I guess, unless you're really chasing after a new round of funding or something like that. But and actually on that note, that's another thing that I want to talk to you too, because I know that in your career you've been on the advisory board of a handful of startups in Canada, and that to me is super interesting. Right now, I like for our direct hire practice over here, lots of early stage companies, lots of even engineering firms that are spinning out maybe a SaaS product for the first time, or just companies that are first time founders hitting the market for the first time. Maybe they have one POC live and they're just trying to figure themselves out. I'd be curious to know some about your experience doing advisory for early stage companies bringing their products to market, because I take it that's probably where you're able to share the most that's valuable to them.
Yeah, you know what? I often get asked because there's a lot of people who are seasoned and they're executives, but they haven't been able to find an advisory board position because it is interesting doing your normal gig and also being on advisory board. So people often ask me, how do you actually get on advisory boards in the first place, right? So to me, like I've always tried to have strong relationships, not just at the company you're working with, but the partners you work with it as well, because you never know when that partner actually needs advisory services because they actually work with you as a customer, right? So I think that's been a really good way of actually driving advisory board opportunities. And I think this type of stuff where we're talking about thought leadership in specific industry sectors gets you a little bit above everybody else in terms of visibility. So slight more visibility in those relationships and often position yourself on this is how I can drive growth for your organization. I think you have to be proactive in trying to find advisory boards that way. But yeah, I do advisory boards in a few different areas. I did one for a company called Wisdom.ai. That was like, I would say that was AI driven chatbots and knowledge before ChatGPT and the LLMs just took over the last couple of years. That was like probably like 5 or 6 years ago. The good thing for them is I was there for a couple of years, and the last 2 years they exited to, I think they were bought by Calabrio. And my help there was I was leading a telco brand, and as I exited, I was able to support them in their kind of telco relationships and how they grow their product. Most recently, I work as a lead of the advisory board chair for a company called Smooth Commerce. They deal with like e-commerce for restaurants, hotels, and large organizations who have corporate ordering. That's a fun area. They're kind of startup to scale up at this point. I also help my brother with his apparel company, which is sports apparel, really for Canadian clubs and high schools. And I also support a organization called 360 Pros, which does 3D visualizations and AR and VR for a variety of different brands out there in Canada as well. So I like to kind of play in a bunch of different realms, and it keeps you hungry and active and on the pulse of different sectors. And I think you don't have to challenge yourself with your just in your sandbox type growth. These companies who have different problems sets actually challenge you to grow in a variety of different ways. You can apply your knowledge to them, but they also challenge you back because they've got different challenges that you haven't really thought about in your career.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, even personally, that's probably been the most exciting thing about what I've been able to do over the past couple of years is, whether it's been, through memoryBlue generating leads or booking meetings for a handful of different technology companies, even just filling sales roles for a handful of different companies, finding out what's attractive about this company on paper, what's the personal feel, what's the technology doing, staying on top of trends. I mean, I never get to stop learning. And I could see it potentially getting, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like people in senior leadership who maybe have worked with an OEM or maybe one type of company don't go out and do advisory board stuff, or maybe like you brought up, they don't keep the partnership stick sharp. I feel like that could get boring, but yeah, I'm not sure. But you've been you probably more than a few others. If we just talk about folks who are in C-level leadership, in marketing, in demand generation, that kind of thing. Not a whole lot of folks are are out there putting a personal brand out there, putting out their own content, their own spin on things. Is that something like I don't know if you have your own cohort of other CMOs or other folks that are in the heads of digital, heads of growth, or that kind of thing. But I feel like for myself, I've been able to generate some type, like the personal awareness has helped the personal business thing a lot. And it's kind of like you putting in little bits every day to generate awareness just makes you more likely to get nicely surprised for business opportunities, personal career, that kind of thing. Is that what you had in mind? I don't know when the first time that you ever went on camera was, or that you started putting opinions out there, but I wanted to see if you could tell me about what you went into it thinking that you would do, and maybe some of the fruit that you've been able to reap since having done that for so long.
I think it first started in 2004. So I started a blog at that company I was talking about, the agency. So I started a blog called, I was getting into web analytics, now called digital analytics, called web analytics because that's all there was at that time, no mobile apps. But I started a blog called Web Analytics World, webanalyticsworld.net, but it's been recently sold when I left it about 10 years ago. So my whole purpose is I need to get out of my comfort zone because I was always like, you know what, I feel nervous speaking. And when you're in a client facing role, that feeling that you have around nervousness and not being able to execute properly, I think I felt like, how do I get over that? So I made myself speak at 10 conferences in 1 year. So that was my initial goal, right? I need to be able to speak confidently. And if I can speak about a topic in front of a couple hundred people, I can do it in front of anybody. And therefore I would be considered an expert. So that led to, an interesting conference opportunities, and it allowed me to monetize the content a bit, which is great. Now that I continue to do it, I think to me it's a bit of a challenge to also say that can I talk about say an important topic in marketing or even business that is relevant to people before me and after me, and that's challenging, right? Can you stay relevant over 20 plus years in a space of a sector of marketing? So that's another challenge for me. In terms of what it's led for fruits and bearings, like the way I would say it's primarily, I would say that's where some of the advisory board work has come from, because it's elevated you specifically. I think when I first started in telco, that kind of initial content writing also led to that initial role as well. So yeah, I would say it has led to advisory board roles, and it has led to some positions in my career as well. But I would say the third benefit is it keeps you active in new relationships that are formed. So I do get a lot of people asking me for, can you give me thoughts on career advice or get me a job, which is fine. I'm actually open to it because if people need help in that area, that's okay to do that. But it also opens opportunities into people who are looking for advice on to growing their company, or your perspective on advising on different topics that exist out there. So it's not easy to do it, but challenging yourself to rise to the occasion is important, and it does have opportunities that open up when you are successful at it, I guess.
Yeah, no, totally. And when you had gotten started, that was probably before video cameras weren't. I'm just kidding, but it's probably like not everybody had a camera on. Well, maybe everything was a camera phone at that time. I want to speculate, but also not everybody probably had enough storage on whatever device they had for, however many videos are out there. But yeah, to your point, I always tell, in our recruiting practice, it's way easier. It always acts as an icebreaker too, when it could be a company or a person. If you have video out there or anything that shows a person who represents a brand, it humanizes you, and I feel like it can humanize the brand a whole lot. And it also, it's a great icebreaker for one. If you just need something to talk to somebody about. I met a guy yesterday who he had been in enterprise sales, works for like a big data analytics company. Got into that 3 years ago as a baller enterprise rep, bringing in I want to say about 10 million a year or so. And the in your boy for the previous 20 years of his life had just been a sportscaster. And somehow through, well, it was through grad school, but he made a connection, got into that. But doing a little bit of research, and this guy who I've found on LinkedIn might have had like 73 connections on there. But you look everywhere else, and if you watch sports, hockey, or anything, you probably would have seen him before. So, yeah, I think it's good for folks to put some stuff out there. Check out.
Like, I think everybody should realize that even though somebody might be a VP plus at a company, the company doesn't define that they're some kind of celebrity or athlete, right? Everyone is a human, and everyone should be accessible that way. They're not any better or worse than anyone else at that point.
Yeah, totally. And for for some of the startups that I've represented before, even the guys who come through, maybe like 20-year tech industry vets, multiple successful exits under their belt, even if their English isn't that great and they're kind of boring in front of a camera or what have you, them just being on camera and saying something out loud makes it so much easier to sell. I mean, one, somebody interested in working for the company, but I feel like I feel much more comfortable buying a product from a person as opposed to a website, as an example. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about mergers and acquisitions. Maybe this can tie into some about private equity too. And I guess in a fancy way, you kind of did make your way to being a little bit of a PE teacher or being involved in PE.
Hilarious.
Yeah.
It became a PE teacher.
Yeah, exactly. You found a way around it. You took the scenic route. So you got into that somehow. I know I have a handful of acquaintances. What you want to have it that are like the CMO or a CRO at a private equity firm. And what I think is super interesting about them is it's kind of like they'll go on assignment for a little bit. Like they'll be, all right, hey, we just bought this company over here. They sell to banking, they sell to finance. We need to completely clean house. They're doing random acts of marketing right now. Fundamentals are great, but we need to develop some go-to-market. I just wanted to see broad spectrum, like your experience, whether it's from, finding out what the download is. Hey, how do I help your marketing program succeed? Whether that be from, the PE background or whether it just be from an agency perspective, or like just being an employee or something. How does that differ from your entry point? Launching or fixing a marketing program for somebody.
Right. So is your question from a merger and acquisition perspective, when a merger happens, how do we leverage like other marketing teams as the merger happens? Is that where your question is going from?
I do want to know that, and I think I was sort of trying to get to that. I think what I was really getting at is just like what's different about you just going to work for somewhere and then you're going to be in charge of marketing versus to your point, maybe you're inside of a merger and you're making that happen. What's different or what's similar about those two different scenarios?
Yes. Yeah, I would say in your day-to-day, like I remember in a corporate marketing role or corporate digital role, the big fundamental difference, especially if you're working for a large organization, is you've got a lot of systems and support around you, right? You've got HR processes, you've got analysts around you, you've got, say, recruiting around you, you've got technology around you, all soup to nuts. It's actually quite perfect because the systems around you make your job easier so you can focus on your role and solve your challenges. I think in a corporate environment, I felt that. In a scale up, you kind of have to do a lot of things yourself, right? Like you don't have the executive assistants. HR teams and recruitment teams are running as fast as they can, but not a lot of capacity. IT teams are offshore often, which there's obviously some differences in time zone there that you have to deal with. And on the analysis side, do your own analysis if you really want to, right? Like, so these are like you know what, the shortfalls in terms of support around you, but the benefits are if you can obviously make an exit in the company, that means great things on that perspective as well, right? So there's kind of positives and cons as well. But as you're merging, I remember I think the big thing that happens, especially from a marketing lens, as you merge, is the due diligence that's required across, you know, what is the best capabilities exist between the two marketing teams in the merger, right? Tools and systems, marketing technology stacks, talent evaluation, results to performance. I would say the weight and capability that they have in new sectors. Can this be like somewhere you can actually integrate and grow, or is there something you have to kind of reorganize, completely restructure, and even lose a few people or add a few people to be successful as well? So during a merger, actually, I would say, and I've went through like 2 or 3 of them in the last, say, 18 months, it becomes like very chaotic, actually, because it's all encompassing, because you're trying to manage not just your team, you're trying to manage like new personalities coming in, and you're trying to manage other kind of, not investors, but I would say the private equity group also supporting that at the same time. And the key is, how do you come out of the merger in a way that you're more meaningful together versus just singular, because you were 2 companies before, now you're 1 company, and getting because the whole reason that they acquired that, or merged or acquired a company, is you're looking for scale, you're looking for growth, and you're looking for a reduction in costs because you can scale with shared resources more effectively.
Right.
And that's not often the case that all those 3 or 4 things happen. It often takes a lot of time before that happens. And one of the key areas is like, how do you actually correlate and synergize between personalities that never work together, and ensure everyone has really good accountability on who's running the ship sometimes as well. So a lot of factors go into it to have a successful merger acquisition.
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of the difference of, you know, somebody who you hired a while back. That's like, that's a kid that you either had yourself or like a brother or sister, versus, you know, mom and dad split up, they remarry, they bring on a new kid, and then everybody's sharing the same house, and y'all got to figure out how to get along. There's new rules and what have you. So,
Exactly right. Yeah.
yeah, that's super interesting. In the theme of M&A and doing mergers. So I've had a couple of customers and folks I've worked with recently that have completely swapped a brand name before. You know, like us, for example, we've gone through a merger and we adopted one, some type of, we'll call it brand hegemony. And I'll see sometimes through M&A, folks will take, you know, one brand name that'll work well for here, maybe keep a product type, or that kind of thing. But I've also seen some folks just completely swap names and start from scratch. Or sometimes folks will keep the same brand name, but maybe make 2 different websites, one for Latin America, one for the United States. And if your digital isn't done right, you can make it look like you have maybe way fewer followers in one thing or another. Do you have an example of maybe like a really difficult merger or like a rebrand that was really difficult to pull off, or how you overcame something like that?
Yeah, I would say the one we did. So when I was at Acolyte, we had merged with a company called Bounteous. So Acolyte would be the technology arm, and Bounteous would be the more of the front end experience arm. Like, these are the 2 entities, and each one carried weight in different, call it, arenas, right?
Yeah.
Bounteous is great for the CMO, CDO, Chief Product Officer. Acolyte great for the CTO, CIO, right, head of data. So, but if you bring them together, you get all of it end to end, which would be a beautiful play, but really complex, because you're dealing with, I don't know, 3,000 people in Bounteous, most of them in North America, and then you're dealing with 3,000 or 4,000 people in Acolyte, where 75% of them are sitting in India, actually. So the difficulty of that is, okay, you know, you have a lot of leaders at play, which is how do you manage all of that specifically, And you have a lot of different cultures at play, which makes things difficult, right? Different values are more important. Different, obviously, cultures have different core importances and things like that. So you have to be mindful of that as well. But from a pure branding perspective, what we had to do was we actually had to understand which brand would actually carry most weight in the market. So our choices were Acolyte, Bounteous, or New, right? And so we had done a bit of a transition instead. So we went from, okay, you know what, we will do some market research, and we figured out that actually Bounteous is actually has more weight in the market in North America, and that was a key selling point. So the research portion is very important, and you can add like a lot of brand research companies who can support you with that, with surveys and analysis to across your target segment to give you kind of a really good gauge into where there's weaknesses and strengths in the brand. But we knew that when you have that many people and clients with Acolyte specifically, we had to make a transition, right? So the company decided to go Bounteous, but in the meantime, we actually had an interim brand called Bounteous X Acolyte, meaning times Acolyte, together meaning more powerful.
Yeah.
So the difficulty became the transition to get to Bounteous. We had to have an interim brand that we had to kind of redo assets, redo collateral, manage all the LinkedIn social profiles as well, while managing multiple countries. In addition to that, we thought that it would be important to actually keep Acolyte, Bounteous X Acolyte, longer in India because they had the Acolyte brand for college recruitment was very important. And whereas Bounteous didn't have that weight in India. So I guess the challenges came from how do you manage all of that across global time zones, global countries, global cultures, be effective in your sales process so it looks like you're a unified company and still end out 12 months later to the ultimate brand that you want. So a lot of challenges came that way to make that effective. And there's a lot of reasoning and a lot of analysis and a lot of opinion in how you do that effectively. But those are some of the challenges that we had come through.
Yeah, no, I'll bet. I mean, I feel like pulling off something like that in 12 months is that's a pretty short time frame. If you and the team made that one work out, I think that deserves a back pat. But we got to get to some Q&A questions, so I'm going to take a look at what we got over here. All right, let's see. Yeah, what do we take? All right, so I got one from Jessica. She asked, so you mentioned starting out in software development. What was the biggest challenge you faced when switching into marketing, and how did you overcome it?
Actually, the biggest challenge I faced, and I actually made a really kind of big mistake when I went from kind of one role in the agency into an actual corporate role, Shaw Communications. I remember this specifically. It's the communication, actually. You're not speaking about architecture at all anymore. You're talking about business challenges, business value, impact, and growth, right? So I remember in one presentation, I was trying to pitch why a marketing cloud stack would be important for Shaw Communications. And so I didn't really position it as, you know what, I think we could get really good value from retention. It actually could increase subscriber value per customer. I actually came in with a architecture diagram of all these systems that need to talk together and how this is how it would aggregate customer data. This is how we would retarget different users. This is what would require to do A and B testing. This is the content management system platform. So I say this to everybody, and that was obviously so the president I was presenting to. He's like, I don't really understand what you're saying. It sounds fantastic, but I have no idea what you're talking about. So on reflection, I came back with the right story. But I think whether it's software to marketing or any type of person, I think communication to your key stakeholder in a way that is impactful is super important. Now that's easier said than done. Have clear communications. I bet you dimes for donuts is actually the hardest thing you'll do is to be able to clearly communicate, because that's what opens doors. That's what gets you budget. That's what gets you approval. That's what gets you the raise. That's what gets you a promotion. And those are not easy things to do if you can't clearly communicate.
Yeah, I've caught myself. There's been plenty of times where I think I've always been able to communicate a lot and be able to talk a lot, but plenty of times in my professional career where I'm like, I've just realized that I've said a whole lot of words with very, very little meat. So I'm totally with you. All right, let's see. So for our next question, all right, got a question about lead gen. So talking about, I think this is marketing strategy, demand gen. When balancing short-term lead gen with long-term brand building, how do you decide where to allocate budget when resources are tight?
Yeah, I think the big one for me, and I face this challenge a number of times in the private equity space, is often you have a kind of a short time frame to show results in, and that's what you're really referring to. Whereas you could invest in brand, and everyone wants to do it, but brand takes 12, 18, 24 months and hundreds of thousands of dollars to do that effectively and to sustain that over a course of a year. So that's why, you know what, everyone wants to do both, and both are important, but sometimes for immediate benefit, if I was to say what would be the most important thing I would do right now for a B2B company, I would essentially create, get a really good value proposition, understand, what my selling points of view are, really understand my ICP, which is ideal customer profile, so I can target them effectively, get a really good primer on a specific business unit or service offering, and I would deploy actually SDRs right away. And that's what obviously you guys do, and I've done that with you guys as well. But that's something that will give you immediate benefit. So if the SDRs can start to take your scripts about your selling motions. So if you're selling, in our case, we're selling technology services to healthcare companies, and sell that effectively, and work against your chase list that is very segmented, and start to book your sales team really strong meetings that are BANT qualified, meaning they've got budget and need, and they've got the decision making power, and they want to make that decision in a reasonable period of time. Those are really, it's difficult to do unless you have a good team behind you, but it's actually a really short term opportunity that can gain you momentum as you figure out your longer term goals as well.
Yeah, what's interesting about that, and having seen, I mean, I feel like I've been in SDR land for my whole professional career, but the one thing that SDRs, BDRs, whatever you want to call them, that they do, that's not just booking meetings, is also listening to the customer. I don't think most business leaders, founders, or whoever have you are listening to the customers or the end buyers as much of the SDR teams, at least until you have maybe an established account management, customer success motion. It's, if you're talking about somebody who's about to be on the cusp of buying, that's something else that they bring to the table that I don't think gets talked about very often.
I think you're right. Trying to put your elevator pitch in someone's like email inbox or a phone call that's, they're not expecting, and try to land that is a very difficult task. And if you do connect, getting that feedback that you can take back to your sales team or your product team is very valuable. So I think it's actually a very difficult role, the BDR SDR role. But if done correctly, you're right, a lot of intel can be gained because they're kind of getting firsthand knowledge of how is your overall elevator pitch or your capabilities or value proposition landing in the eyes of someone who doesn't know about you yet.
Yeah, for sure. Well, coming up on time window, so want to be respectful and also grab one more question. I think this is super timely while we're talking about the whole messaging angle and the elevator pitch. So, and this made me think of this because I remember one of the times when I was first becoming an SDR, I had looked at marketing copy or an email that was put together, and they said, all right, set up your email account, send this out to everybody. Here's a white page that you can attach to it. And I took one look at it and realized this thing's 5 pages long. It's got more words in it than I know, and I consider myself pretty vocabularious. And I shortened it down to, a 3-page thing to book a meeting with me, because through our program, you will become the de facto healthcare facility where anybody who gets a radiology visit, that insurance money will go to you. And I booked meetings with literally everybody that came through. And I didn't make that up. I had to distill that and figure that out. So this made me think about it. But next question is, what's an example of an elevator pitch that you had to correct that that was significantly different from what it was for the product for when you first heard it?
Yeah, I think, let me just think about that for a second. I think it was like when I was working early days, one of the things that often agencies will do is they believe that you know what, like sizzle videos and sizzle reels and creating like really beautiful graphics are the ways to people's, you know what, inboxes and the ways to making decisions. And kind of like you, where you took like the 5-pager and brought it down, I think people very quickly forget that although things might be beautiful, people aren't going to necessarily click on something or engage with something if it's not like challenging or top of mind, right? So what I often teach and preach is like if you look at somebody who at an ideal time for you to sell something to somebody who, if they've made a change to a specific new role and they've got a new mandate, and say if you're pitching to a new CDO or CMO, that person typically will take like say 36 days ramp. So it's hard to get them kind of into a new deal that way. But I know for a fact that the next 30 to 90 days, they have to show something of value. So that timeliness is important when you send a communication, and addressing a very pointed 1 to 2 pieces of challenge is very, very important, like you probably did as well, because it's top of mind, it's relevant, and they actually could use you versus something that's broader and beautiful and visionary and it takes 2 or 3 or 5 minutes to go through. It just, I guess the person has to realize when you get 15 or 20 of those in a given week or day, how can they possibly go through that? But if something cuts through the noise with precision on a challenge that you're facing and they did it for somebody else, and you know what, they might have to try 3, 4, 5, 6 times, but they get you on the 6th try because they are persistent. I think those things probably resonate more effectively versus the hot videos or the graphics or infographics that people just can't engage with and takes too long to kind of digest.
Yeah, I could take a look at the ooeyest gooeyest slice of lasagna of all time, but if I'm not hungry, I'm not reaching for a bite, or I'm not going to get it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's all the time for question today, guys. So, Manoj, it was great having you on. Thanks so much. I feel 10 times smarter and more equipped for my own future after having talked to you. Where just to fill everybody in on anything else that I missed out, I know you mentioned your brother's sports apparel brand. You want to give us the name of that? I didn't catch that earlier. And also, where can people find you, find out about what you're doing today, or anything else that you'd like to plug?
Yeah, I'm at, I work for a company called EMIDS, Healthcare Technology Services Company. So we are the preeminent healthcare tech services company for North American healthcare organizations. You can find me on LinkedIn and my brother's website if you're interested in gear for sports in Canada. It's VBS Apparel. So check him out too.
VBS Apparel and EMIDS. You heard it from the man himself. Manoj, thanks so much for joining again. Been a pleasure having you on. Look forward to reconnecting down the line. Happy Tuesday.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
All right. See ya.